Hey YouTube, what's up? Thanks for tuning in. Big mess here on my workbench. Chassis comparison of two awesome Toyota Land Cruiser 81 to 18th trucks. The RocHobby Katana and the EazyRC Patrion or Patriot. Those two awesome trucks do have exactly the same hard body, the same interior, exactly the same bumpers, same beadlock wheels, but they do come with different chassis and different electronics, and they vary a lot in price. The Katana is about 50% more expensive than the Patrion, and I thought I will take a deeper look inside and disassemble the chassis and check what are the differences, and is the much more expensive Katana much better or even only better in its chassis components than the much cheaper EazyRC Patrion or Patriot. What's the new name? It was sold as Patrion in the beginning when I bought it, and now it's sold as Patriot. And the Katana, there is now a new version, a licensed Toyota Land Cruiser 80 by FMS RocHobby, which differs only in few aspects. And there won't be a lot of people probably be interested in such stuff, but I'm one of those crazy guys, and that's why I would make this video. So here you can see disassembled, totally disassembled EazyRC Patrion rear axle, central transmission, front axle, and a totally disassembled HobbyPlus CR-18 Kratos chassis, rear axle, central transmission, front axle. So probably you will ask, why a HobbyPlus CR-18 Kratos chassis and not my RocHobby Katana chassis? Simple reason. The Katana chassis as the Atlas 6x6 chassis, they are more or less HobbyPlus CR-18 chassis. They vary, differ only in few points I will show you. And since I did already equip my RocHobby Katana last year with ball bearings all around, I didn't see any need for disassembling this again. I did not yet equip my CR-18 Kratos chassis with ball bearings, and that's why I disassembled the HobbyPlus CR-18 chassis. And what you can see here, what I will also compare, the new EazyRC Arizona Jeep, which is more or less the same setup as the EazyRC Patrion or Patriot. It differs in few aspects, such as wheelbase and chassis rails. I will show this to you later. But now let's take a deeper look inside the guts. Maybe some of you are as crazy as me and are interested in this. And yeah, let's start. Before, I will only make a super short overview about the differences in electronics and all the stuff you get with the trucks, and then a really deep look inside the guts. In a nutshell, what you do already know from other videos about packing and electronics, both the EazyRC Patrion Patriot and the Arizona and the RocHobby Katana do come in very good packing. Banggood has the highest reputation for bad packing, but you don't have to be afraid. Super sturdy packing. The EazyRC models do come very well boxed in a sturdy box outside. Inside a colorful box, Patrion, Arizona, and inside plastic packing, super secure. And the RocHobby Katana super nice sturdy box of cartilage, and inside this super nice packing box, foam case, awesome. But in contrary to those, the HobbyPlus CR-18 and CR-24 models do not come in Banggood-proof packing. They come in a packing like this. My CR-18 Kratos box arrived quite damaged. Radio and electronics, the Patrion, Patriot, and also the EazyRC Arizona to come with super simple radios with no adjustments but steering and throttle trim. So really cheap stuff, but it works. While the RocHobby Katana and all the HobbyPlus models to come with those nice small 3-channel receivers, you can also use with the Turbo Racing 4-channel receivers. Those ones, if you want to upgrade. By the way, there's even a new one now with gyro, but you probably won't need a gyro for a crawler. Those are 3-channel radios. You can do steering, throttle trim, and also endpoint adjustments, and you can reverse the channels. And in the RocHobby Katana, channel 3 is an on-off switch for light, what's quite nice and unique. All the other HobbyPlus CR-18 style models don't have an on-off switch. The EazyRC models do come with a very simple receiver ESC unit, also including plugs for the lights. Not waterproof, of course you could waterproof it, and they do come with a 5-wire servo, unfortunately, while the HobbyPlus models and the RocHobby Katana do come with the typical HobbyPlus CR-18 style receiver unit, receiver ESC unit. This one from the RocHobby Katana additionally. No, that's from the Atlas 6x6. That's the one from the Katana, and it does have additionally plugs for the lights. And the RocHobby Katana does come with a separate light controller unit, which you will find inside the body. And as already mentioned, you can switch on off lights in the Katana, front and rear lights, by the channel 3 button of the radio, while in the Patrion and in the Arizona, lights are off if the car is standing still. If you're going into forward direction, front beams will be on. If you're going reverse direction, rear beams will be on, so not very nice. Both do come with blinking or turning lights, so the Katana and the EazyRC Patrion and the Arizona, those will always work when you're turning. The Katana does have the turning lights on the inside position in front, what's quite strange. The new version, the licensed Toyota LC80, does have the blinkers on the outside, so they corrected this. The Patrion and also the Arizona do have their blinking lights on the outer positions. And the Katana and all CR-18 models do come with nice small 3-wire servos. You can also use if you buy an upgrade receiver. Batteries, the RocHobby Katana does come with a 2S LiPo with LoSi style plug, and the EazyRC Patrion and the Arizona also 2S LiPo LoSi style plug. The Katana does come with a typical CR-18 600 mAh LiPo battery, while the EazyRC models, the Arizona and the Patriot do come only with the 380 mAh LiPo. The 600 mAh LiPo of the Katana or CR-18s will work with the Patriot, no problem, same interior, but it will not work with the new Arizona. The battery compartment in the Arizona is a little bit smaller, so you would have to cut the sidewalls. So guess that's everything about the electronics. Additionally, the RocHobby Katana CR-18 electronics are also water or splash proof, as already mentioned, the EazyRC Electronics Unhot. And now let's take a deeper look into the chassis parts. What I forgot, my EazyRC Patrion did come with 2 of those 380 milliamp hours LiPos, while the Arizona did only come with 1. That was not in the description. And by the way, the new Toyota LC80 by FMS RocHobby, so the new Katana, does also only come with a 380 milliamp hours LiPo and not with a 600 anymore. Let's start with the motors. That's the motor of the EazyRC Patrion, and that's the motor of the CR-18, and the RocHobby Katana does have exactly the same. You see the motor is of the same size, but it's not the same motor. Those CR-18 motors and Katana Atlas 6x6 are the so-called barrage motors. Also the small RGT motors of the 1/24th, those motors do all have exactly the same lettering on the can. So probably they are the same motors. The EazyRC Patrion motor does not have this lettering, it does only have the same size. Both do come with capacitors. The CR-18 motor with this type and the Patrion motor with a kind of board and 1 capacitor here. Both do come with JST PH plugs, 2mm. They do come with different pinions. The Patrion motor does come with a 10-tooth pinion, while the CR-18 motor does come with a 12-tooth pinion. And what you can see here already, the Patrion does come with super nice hex 2mm hardware on many locations, while the CR-18 and the RocHobby Katana and all those models do come only with Phillips head screws. So that's much nicer in the EazyRC models. It's the same for the Arizona. And then let's go to the frame rails. Those are the plastic frame rails everyone mentions of the Patrion, and those are the metal frame rails of the CR-18 Kratos. The RocHobby Katana does have the same type and nearly the exact same frame rails. The only thing that differs, you see here, the shock towers are shorter in the Katana, probably to mount the interior, but beside this it's exactly the same frame rail, and that's a flat metal frame rail. I don't know if it's really better than the plastic frame rail of the EazyRC Patrion. Here it's stiffer, it doesn't flex that much, but what you can see here again, and what's a pain in the ass in all those CR-18, RocHobby Katana, Atlas 6x6, if you saw my Atlas 6x6 disassembling video, you know what I mean. They do use Phillips head screws also to mount the shocks, and they do use a lot. Here you can see it much, hope you can see it on camera, much too much thread lock or glue. So it's extremely difficult in some screws to get those out with the Phillips head screws. The first thing I recommend to do if you should disassemble your Katana or Atlas or CR-18, exchange those screws and don't use that much thread lock. If you've seen my Atlas video, you saw I broke 1 screw. That's really a pain. While in the EazyRC Patrion, the type of mounting the shocks is exactly the same with this spacer and an M2 screw, but the screw is a nice Phillips head screw, and of course, because it's a plastic frame, you will not have to use thread lock. In the Patrion and the Arizona, the penhead bar is mounted to the frame, while in the Katana and in the CR-18s, the pennant bar is mounted to the center plate and not to the frame directly. Hope you can see this here. The frame and frame rails of the EazyRC Patrion and the new EazyRC Arizona are not the same. That's quite strange. The Arizona does have a little bit a longer wheelbase, so not shorter than the Patrion. So you can see this here. The Patrion body does not fit, it's a little bit too short. So the wheelbase is shorter in the Patrion, but the frame rails are longer than in the Arizona. Check this here. You can see that's the Arizona chassis. I did already heavily modify this. You see no stock electronics anymore. So here's the start of the Arizona frame rail, and the frame rail of the Patrion is maybe 1.5–2 centimeters longer, and does also have different types of shock towers, shock mounting towers. Shorter wheelbase, longer rails. Biggest advantage, hex screws compared to Phillips head screws in the RocHobby Katana and all the other CR-18 models. What else? Axle and drive shafts in the CR-18 and in the Katana, those are all the same type of axle, gearing, and even the small CR-24 to have the same type of axle housings, only longer end parts in the larger models, and same types of drive shafts. So that's the same for all of those models. And those are very different to those in the EazyRC models. Let's start with the shocks. That's the shock of the EazyRC, Patrion, Patriot and Arizona. And those are the shocks of all those CR-18 and also CR-24 models. Also the RocHobby Katana, it does come with such shocks, only with stronger springs. I did already put upgrade shocks on mine, but those metal shocks are not really good. Check the video about the shock tests I made for this, and those shocks are really, really bad in all the CR-18, CR-24, maybe AMX Rock, FTX, whatever, under whatever names those are sold. You cannot do any modification nearly, and they are weak and not good. You get them in red in some models, like in the Kratos, or you get them in black and with different springs. Sometimes you get different springs for tuning. The shocks in the EazyRC models, they don't work much better if out of the box, but they are much nicer. But what you can do in those, they don't have a screw here, but you can unscrew the cap and you can do an oil-filled shock mod with those, and after this they work awesome. I did make a special video about this, and I did already do it in my Arizona. So here there are the oil-filled shocks, and they work awesome compared to the stock shocks. Tires, rims and tires. The EazyRC and the RocHobby do come with exactly the same tires. Super nice speedlock wheels and nice tires, no foams inside. And those tires of the EazyRC Arizona, EazyRC Patrion and the RocHobby Katana, and the rims, they do differ from the CR-18 and CR-24 tires. So you can see that's from the Kratos, a wheel, and the rims are significantly smaller. The Kratos and all the other CR-18 models do come with 1-inch rims, while the rims of the Katana and the EazyRC models are a little bit larger. So probably, let's check this. This is a 1-inch RC 4-wheel drive stamped steel rim on a SCX24, and you can see the tires of the Toyota LC80s and the Arizona. They are significantly larger. They won't fit to RC 4-wheel. The rims won't fit to RC 4-wheel drive tires. But it's super nice and easy to modify those and to upgrade those with weights. But unfortunately, the wheel weights you can buy for the CR-18 tires won't work in those. So you will have to make your own weights. I did already do this too. I super heavily modified and used super hard foams in my Arizona, and the wheels are super heavy now in front, more than 40 grams each and 37 grams or whatever each in the rear wheels. I should make a special video about my modified Arizona probably, but it's super nice to tinker and super nice to do. So thumbs up for the tires. And now to a point where the RocHobby Katana differs a little bit to the normal CR-18 models, and I don't know why. These are the drive shafts. That's a rear drive shaft of the CR-18 Kratos, and that's the rear drive shaft of the RocHobby Katana. Check this out. Different color, more shiny, seems to be a little bit more sturdy, but openings and everything is the same. So they have this half circle type opening, so they will work on the other model too. And what's strange, they do have exactly the same wheelbase. So the RocHobby Katana drive shaft here on top is always much farther out of the counterpart than the CR-18 drive shaft. And the drive shaft of the EazyRC models, that's the rear drive shaft of the Patrion, they look nearly exactly the same as the drive shafts of the RocHobby Katana, but if you take a closer look, the end parts are different. The end parts of the EazyRC Patrion are longer and they have a different diameter of the openings, so they won't work with the other model. Quite strange. Don't know why the Katana has a special type of drive shaft and not the same, doesn't use the same as all the other CR-18 models. By the way, you can buy metal drive shafts for those. In the front drive shafts, here the RocHobby Katana drive shaft and here the CR-18 Kratos drive shaft, there's not such a difference. They have about the same size, both left and right, and the RocHobby Katana drive shaft does compare to the EazyRC Patrion drive shaft. That way the centerpiece seems to be exactly the same, and the end piece again different, larger opening and longer in the Patrion here on the bottom side and shorter in the RocHobby Katana. Links of the Katana and the Patrion are about the same. You see there is a difference in color a little bit, but not in length, and they are also about the same quality, of course. Plastic links. So that's the same link. They do also use the same type of screws with balls and ball ends, 4 mm. They are nearly the same, so you can exchange those links and also the shocks without any problems. However, using those special types of screws makes it very difficult to mount aftermarket or different shocks to the Patrion and to the RocHobby Katana. The Katana does only come with 3 links in front, and that's the Arizona. You can see the difference here. Does come with 4 links plus penhard bar, and the Katana and the CR-18 models do come with 3 links and penhard bar. Steering links of the Patrion and the Arizona plastic work that way. The way of mounting with the ball screw here is even nicer than in the CR-18 models, where they only use a screw, but the steering links are square in the Katana and in the CR-18s, while they are round in the EazyRC models, but there's not a lot of difference. They seem even to be more sturdy in the EazyRC models. And now let's come to the axles and gearings and bearings. Both do come with bushings and no ball bearings all around. Only the EazyRC models do come with 2 ball bearings in the front axle. The EazyRC models, the Patrion, Patriot and the Arizona, do use a lot more bearings than the RocHobby Katana and the CR-18 models. So here you see the bearings of the rear axle of the RocHobby Katana and the CR-18. Those are only 5 bearings. 2 8mm outer diameter by 4mm inner diameter and 3mm width, and 3 pieces of 6mm outer diameter and 3mm inner diameter and 2.5mm width. The EazyRC models do have 4 6x3 by 2.5mm and 2 large ones 8x5 by 2.5mm and 2 medium ones 7x4 by 2.5mm. And in the front axle it's the same. The RocHobby Katana and the CR-18 do use 3 pieces 6x3 by 2.5mm bearings and 2 pieces 8x4 by 3mm bearings and 2 pieces 8x5 by 2.5mm bearings, while the EazyRC models do have 2 pieces 6x3 by 2.5mm, 2 pieces 7x4 by 2.5mm bushings, and 2 pieces 8x5 by 2.5mm, and they do already come with 2 ball bearings, those large ones with 12 by 8 by 3.5mm. And in the center transmission it's the same. The RocHobby Katana and the CR-18 models use 6 pieces of small 5 by 2 by 2.5mm bushings. You have to exchange them for bearings if you want, and 2 little bit larger ones 6 by 3 by 2.5mm. The EazyRC models, they do have 2 pieces 6 by 3 by 2.5mm bushings and 4 pieces 5 by 2 by 2 and 2 very tiny ones, black ones. Those are those ones here, which do have the dimensions of 4mm outer diameter, 1.5mm inner diameter and 2mm width. Those are magnetic, so they should be made out of steel or whatever, while all the others are brass bushings. Now let's check the axle housings. The gearing in the EazyRC models is very well lubricated. So you can see this here, a lot of grease. While the HobbyPlus and the Katana do not come with any lubrication in the axles, only a little bit in the center transmission. And axle housings of the EazyRC Patrion and axle housings of the RocHobby Katana and the CR-18s. So yeah, the CR-18, the HobbyPlus and RocHobby, they look better. They are a little bit smaller and look better. However, this doesn't mean they are better. What's really a pain in the EazyRC models is in the rear axles, only in the rear axles, to get those end pieces off the axles. They are screwed and clipped, and to get this off is really not super easy, and it was quite a pain. I did it in the Arizona and in the Patrion. In the Katana and in the CR-18, those end pieces are only screwed. Gearing is a little bit different. Both do come with large gears 24 teeth and small gear 12 teeth. Small gear 12 teeth, the way the small gear is mounted to the shaft is different. So in the Katana and the CR-18s there is this pin made out of metal, and the EazyRC models do come with this plastic shaft, which is of larger diameter than in the CR-18 and the Katana, and this is directly mounted to the drive shafts. However, the shaft, or this piece of the gear, is mounted through this opening, which takes two ball bearings inside and outside, while in the CR-18 and in the Katana there is only one bearing. Furthermore, the axle shafts are divided in two parts that way, while there is only one long shaft in the HobbyPlus models and the RocHobby Katana, of course. It's mounted that way. What's no problem in the rear axle, but what will be a problem in the front axle, what you will see now. In the front axle it's absolutely the same with the RocHobby Katana, using only one bushing for supporting the small gear, and the Patrion and the Arizona, the EazyRC models, use two bushings. What's really nice, the EazyRC models do come already with two ball bearings, those large ones, which go to the C-hubs of the front axle. Where is it? Here inside. So you do already get ball bearings, and the RocHobby Katana and the HobbyPlus models use bushings here too. But what's a pain in the RocHobby Katana and in all CR-18, CR-24 models that you can see here, they do come with dog bone style steering, and you will not get out the bushings and also the gear because they are held by this tiny pin. You see, I did already hammer out the pin on this side. I did already do it in many of those models. And that way you can get the pinions and the gearing on and off. But dog bone style steering was the counterpart, so very simple and for sure not perfect. And that's the big surprise, the EazyRC models do come with universal steering. How awesome is this? Full metal, really nice quality, and of course much better than dogboat style steering. So here it's the same again. It's super, they come lubricated. It's super easy to change to ball bearings if you want, because you only have to take off the steering unit for the left side, for the right side, and additionally 2 ball bearings in the C-hubs. So wow, thumbs up and a big plus for the EazyRC models. I don't really know if this plastic shaft of this small pinion in the axle is really a disadvantage, because I do know that this type, this can also break. I know it from WPL models, so I don't know if that's really more sturdy than the much larger diameter plastic shaft. We will see. However, I will give a big plus to the EazyRC models in this universal steering and a lot more bushings which you can exchange to bearings. That's quite nice. The only disadvantage is this ugly way to get those end parts off. If you will try it, you will see. Use a tiny screwdriver or whatever to try to bend this, after removing the screws, of course. And now let's come to the central transmission. I show you some pictures of the transmissions because they use a different type of transmission. So here the RocHobby Katana and CR-18 transmission parts and gears, and here the EazyRC parts. The CR-18 uses pinion and spur gear, as we know from larger crawlers or from the SCX-24, for example, on one side, and all the other gears sit on the other side of the central transmission or central gearbox, while in the EazyRC Patrion and in the Arizona there's only one box with all gears in one compartment. I don't really know if that's a disadvantage. That's a different style of mounting and different style of transmission. Here you can compare the C-hubs of the Katana to the C-hubs of the Patrion. They are much larger in the Patrion. So I guess that's all. I hope I didn't forget anything. And yeah, this was the super deep look into the chassis parts. And that's quite a big surprise for me, because we all know the electronics of the Katana or the CR-18 models are much better than the electronics of the EazyRC models, but the chassis parts, I would give this to the EazyRC models. So if you compare the RocHobby Katana to the EazyRC Patrion or Patriot, the body is absolutely the same. There is no difference, also no difference in quality. Body, bumpers, interior, absolutely awesome and the same. They also do use exactly the same tires, which are really, really nice, which are directional, by the way. But if you take only a look to the chassis, then I would give it to the Patrion. Yes, it does have plastic frame rails, but that's the only disadvantage I can see. Maybe they're not so pretty axle housings, but they use a lot more bushings than the CR-18 and the Katana. They do use hex screws, what's super nice compared to the Phillips head screws in the metal frame of the Katana and the CR-18s. And the EazyRC models do come with universal steering, and that's really awesome. And also with 2 ball bearings already, which you do not have to buy if you want to upgrade. I guess that's all. Okay, they do come with different pins for the hex to mount the tires. The hex seem to be a little bit different, and the pins of the CR-18 and of the Katana, where is one, they are thinner than the pins of the EazyRC models. Maybe you can see this here. And by the way, they are also thinner than the pins of the SCX24. Now I lost the pin, what a pain. So what's the final outcome? So if you don't wanna use the electronics of the RocHobby Katana anyway, there's no question. Buy the EazyRC Patrion and you will get universal steering. And you will get many more hex screws than in the CR-18 and the Katana. There are also some Phillips head screws, but for shocks and whatever. And don't forget, you will get much nicer shocks. You can modify those easily to oil-filled shocks, and then they work awesome, while those shocks coming with the RocHobby Katana and all the CR-18 and CR-24 models, they are simply not good, and they are very difficult to upgrade. So 2 awesome trucks, the EazyRC Patriot, Patrion and the RocHobby Katana. What you maybe should also consider if you want to make a decision between those two. Unfortunately, I did not yet see any spare parts for the Patrion, Patriot and also for the Arizona. Probably they will show up someday, then I would buy a lot of those shocks. But actually I wouldn't know where to buy them. While for the RocHobby Katana you get every spare part, you get even spare body parts. I did already buy a spare hood, and you get all chassis parts which are the same as for the HobbyPlus CR-18, so gears, axle housings and all this. If that's important for you, think about this too. And if you are still here in this video, you are for sure super interested in both of those models. And yeah, thanks for watching, guys. And I hope to see you in the next video. I'll be back.